There comes a moment in every empath's journey, a moment when something inside you shifts so profoundly, so completely, that you can never return to who you were before. It is not a moment of anger, though anger may have brought you to this threshold. It is not a moment of hatred, though you have every right to hate what was done to you. It is something far more powerful, far more transformative, far more dangerous to the narcissist than any emotion they taught you to weaponize against yourself. It is the moment you stop absorbing their darkness and begin reflecting it back to them. Carl Jung understood this dynamic long before modern psychology gave us the language of narcissism and empathy. He wrote about the shadow, that part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the aspects of our personality we find too uncomfortable, too shameful, too threatening to integrate. He taught that we project this shadow onto others, seeing in them what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. The narcissist has built their entire existence on this projection. Everything they cannot accept about themselves, every weakness, every flaw, every moment of vulnerability, they have cast onto you. They have made you the container for all the darkness they refuse to own. And because you are an empath, because your nature is to absorb and transmute the pain of others, you accepted this role without even realizing what was happening. You became their shadow carrier. Every time they raged at you for being too emotional, they were projecting their own inability to regulate emotion. Every time they accused you of being selfish, they were deflecting from their own self-absorption. Every time they called you crazy, manipulative, or unstable, they were describing themselves while making you believe these qualities belong to you. This is not metaphor. This is not abstract psychology. This is the precise mechanism by which the narcissist maintains their false self. They need someone to carry what they cannot carry. They need someone to feel what they cannot feel. They need someone to be wrong so they can remain right, to be bad so they can appear good, to be broken so they can pretend to be whole. For months or years or sometimes decades, you performed this function flawlessly. You accepted their projections. You internalized their accusations. You twisted yourself into knots trying to fix the very things in yourself that were never broken, while the actual source of dysfunction remained untouched, protected, reflected in your confusion rather than their awareness. But something has changed now. You have begun to see clearly. The fog has lifted. The spell has broken. And in this clarity, you have discovered something the narcissist never anticipated. You can give it all back. Not through violence or vengeance. Not through stooping to their level or becoming what they are. But through something far simpler and far more devastating to their carefully constructed false reality. You can stop carrying what was never yours to carry. When you refuse to accept their projections anymore, when you stop internalizing their accusations, when you no longer twist yourself to accommodate their distorted version of reality, something extraordinary happens. The darkness they have been storing in you has nowhere to go except back to its original source. They must face themselves. For the narcissist, this is unbearable. Their entire psychological structure is designed to avoid this exact confrontation. They have spent a lifetime building walls against their own shadow, and you were the most important brick in that wall. You were the one who agreed to be the problem so they never had to examine themselves. When you withdraw that agreement, the wall begins to crumble. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about integration. He taught that psychological health requires us to acknowledge and accept all parts of ourselves, including the parts we wish did not exist. The narcissist has refused this integration. They have chosen fragmentation over wholeness, illusion over truth, projection over responsibility. You cannot force them to integrate. You cannot make them face what they have spent a lifetime fleeing. But you can stop participating in their fragmentation. You can stop being the repository for everything they cannot accept about themselves. This is not cruelty. This is boundaries. This is health. This is the natural consequence of their own choices finally arriving at their doorstep instead of yours. When you return their darkness, you will see them panic in ways you have never witnessed before. They will escalate. They will accuse you of things that make no sense. They will project even more frantically, trying to find someone, anyone, who will accept the shadow they can no longer store in you. This is not your concern anymore. You have carried enough. You have absorbed enough. You have tried to heal, fix, understand, and accommodate enough. Now you are simply standing in your truth and allowing them to stand in theirs, even if their truth is something they refuse to see. The philosophers have always taught that truth is liberating. But they rarely mention how terrifying it is for those who have built their lives on lies. When you embody truth, when you refuse to participate in illusion, you become a mirror that reflects reality back with perfect accuracy. The narcissist cannot tolerate this mirror. They will do anything to shatter it, to distort it, to convince you that the mirror itself is broken rather than accept what it reveals. But you are not broken. You never were. You were simply being used as a container for someone else's refusal to grow, someone else's inability to face themselves, someone else's desperate need to remain unconscious. Now you have set down that container. You have walked away from a job that was destroying you. You have returned to sender everything that was never yours to hold. And in this return, something profound begins to happen within you. The space that was once filled with their darkness begins to fill with your own light. The energy you spend managing their shadow becomes available for your own growth. The clarity you could never access while carrying their confusion finally becomes your natural state. You begin to remember who you were before you became their shadow carrier. Or perhaps you discover who you were always meant to become. The difference hardly matters. What matters is that you are no longer defined by what you carry for others. You are defined by what you choose to carry for yourself. The process of returning the narcissist's darkness is not a single act. It is a practice, a discipline, a complete reorientation of how you engage with reality. You have spent so long automatically absorbing whatever they projected onto you that your first instinct is still to catch what they throw. When they accuse you of something untrue, your body tenses. Your mind races to defend yourself. Your heart pounds with the familiar anxiety of needing to prove your innocence, to make them see reason, to convince them of the truth. This is the old pattern. This is the conditioned response. This is you still playing the role of shadow carrier. The new way requires something that feels almost impossible at first. It requires you to simply let their projections fall to the ground between you. To not catch them. To not engage with them. To not internalize them or argue against them or twist yourself trying to disprove them. You simply observe what they are throwing and recognize it as theirs, not yours. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming a whole and integrated self, separate from the projections and expectations of others. For the empath recovering from narcissistic abuse, individuation means learning where you end and they begin. It means developing a membrane between yourself and others that allows connection without absorption. This membrane is not a wall. It is not coldness or disconnection. It is discernment. It is the ability to feel what is happening without making it your responsibility to fix or carry or transform. When the narcissist rages, you feel their rage without becoming responsible for calming it. When they project their shame onto you, you recognize the projection without accepting the shame as your own. When they create chaos, you observe the chaos without diving in to restore order. This drives them absolutely wild. The narcissist has trained you to be their emotional regulator, their shadow container, their chaos manager. When you stop performing these functions, their internal world begins to destabilize. They can no longer offload their uncomfortable feelings onto you. They can no longer avoid their own darkness by keeping you busy carrying it. They must sit with themselves. And for someone who has spent a lifetime fleeing from themselves, this is torture. You will see them scramble for new tactics. They will try to provoke you in different ways, searching for the button that still works, the trigger that will pull you back into the old dynamic. They may suddenly become vulnerable, crying about their childhood, their trauma, their pain. They may become enraged, attacking your character with increased viciousness. They may oscillate wildly between these extremes, sometimes within the same conversation. All of this is their darkness, rising to the surface now that you are no longer there to absorb it. The empath who has not yet awakened will see this escalation and think they need to do more, give more, be more understanding. They will interpret the narcissist's distress as evidence that they are being cruel, that they should soften their boundaries, that they should return to the role of helper and healer. But you are no longer that empath. You have awakened to a deeper truth. Their distress is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are finally doing something right. You are holding them accountable to their own emotional reality. You are refusing to be the buffer between them and the natural consequences of their behavior. You are letting them feel what they have always felt but always projected onto you. This is not punishment. This is reality. This is what happens when someone finally stops enabling another person's refusal to grow. Jung wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The narcissist has avoided this pain by outsourcing it to you. Now that you have withdrawn your services, they must either face the pain of consciousness or find another shadow carrier. Most will choose the latter. This is why you see them move so quickly to new relationships, new sources of supply, new people who do not yet understand the role they are being recruited to play. The narcissist cannot tolerate the void you have left. They cannot sit in the space where their shadow used to be stored. Watching them move on can hurt. Part of you may wonder if they have genuinely changed with this new person, if perhaps you were the problem all along, if maybe they are capable of love but just not with you. This is the last gasp of the old programming. This is your empathy trying to make sense of their behavior through the lens of normal human psychology. But the narcissist does not operate within normal human psychology. They have not changed. They have simply found a new container. The new person is now carrying what you used to carry. The patterns you experienced are being repeated with fresh material. The projection you refuse to accept is being cast onto someone who does not yet know to refuse it. This is not your responsibility to prevent. You cannot save the new supply any more than anyone could have saved you. They must walk their own journey, learn their own lessons, find their own way to awakening. Your responsibility is to maintain your own boundaries, to continue the practice of returning what is not yours, to keep choosing yourself even when every instinct wants to slip back into caretaking mode. As you sustain this practice over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The darkness that once felt so heavy, so consuming, so much a part of your identity begins to lift. You realize how much of what you thought was your depression was actually their despair. How much of what you believed was your anxiety was actually their chaos. How much of what you accepted as your brokenness was actually their fragmentation. You were never as damaged as you believed yourself to be. You were simply carrying damage that did not belong to you. As this weight lifts, you begin to access parts of yourself that were buried under the burden of shadow carrying. Your creativity returns. Your joy becomes accessible again. Your energy, once drained by the constant work of absorbing and managing another person's darkness, becomes available for your own life, your own growth, your own dreams. You start to notice colors more vividly. Music moves you in ways it has not for years. You laugh freely, without the fear that your happiness will trigger their envy or rage. You make plans for your future without checking first whether those plans will threaten their need for you to remain small. This is what it feels like to inhabit your own life again. This is the gift of returning the narcissist's darkness. Not because you harmed them by doing so, but because you freed yourself from a burden that was slowly destroying you. The narcissist may never understand what happened. They may forever tell a story in which you are the villain who abandoned them, who changed, who became cold and cruel. This story serves the same function as all their other projections. It protects them from having to face the truth. Let them have their story. You have yours. And your story is one of liberation. There is a phase in this journey that nobody warns you about, a phase that arrives after you have successfully returned the narcissist's darkness but before you have fully reclaimed your own light. It is the phase of emptiness. You have spent so much time and energy managing their emotional chaos, carrying their shadow, regulating their moods, that when you finally stop, you discover a strange and unsettling void within yourself. You are no longer consumed by their drama, no longer organizing your entire existence around their needs, no longer defined by the role of shadow carrier. But you are not yet sure of who you are without that role. This emptiness can feel more frightening than the chaos you left behind. At least the chaos was familiar. At least the burden gave you a sense of purpose, even if that purpose was slowly destroying you. This emptiness feels like floating in space with nothing to hold on to, no direction, no structure, no clear sense of self. Jung understood this phase deeply. He wrote about the necessary dissolution that precedes transformation, the period of uncertainty that must be endured before a new self can emerge. He called it the dark night of the soul, though it is not dark in the way the narcissistic relationship was dark. This darkness is fertile. It is the darkness of soil, of gestation, of potential waiting to become actual. The other darkness was barren, extractive, depleting. This darkness, though uncomfortable, is creative. You must learn to sit in this emptiness without trying to fill it prematurely. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for an empath, because empaths are deeply uncomfortable with void spaces. Your instinct is to fill, to nurture, to give shape to what is formless. But if you fill this space too quickly, you will simply recreate the old patterns with new people. You will find another shadow to carry because you have not yet learned to exist without that familiar weight. The super empath learns to befriend the emptiness. You sit with it. You let it teach you. You discover that this void is not actually empty at all. It is full of possibility, full of your own undiscovered self, full of the dreams and desires that were buried under years of self-abandonment. In the silence left by the narcissist's absence, you begin to hear your own voice again. At first it is faint, uncertain, almost unrecognizable. You have spent so long speaking their language, adopting their preferences, mirroring their worldview, that your own thoughts feel foreign. You might pick up a book and realize you have no idea if you actually enjoy it. You might order food and catch yourself choosing what they would have wanted rather than what you want. You might have a free evening and feel paralyzed by the freedom, unable to remember what you used to do before everything revolved around managing their needs. This is normal. This is part of the process. You are learning to be a person again rather than a function. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the social world, and the danger of identifying too completely with that mask. When you were with the narcissist, your persona was not just a social mask. It was a survival mechanism. You became whoever you needed to be to keep the peace, to avoid their rage, to maintain the relationship. Now you must discover who you are beneath that survival persona. You must peel back the layers of accommodation and people-pleasing to find the authentic self that has been waiting patiently underneath. This process is not linear. Some days you will feel strong and clear about who you are. Other days you will feel lost, fragmented, unsure if you ever had a real self at all. These doubts are part of the journey. They do not mean you are failing. They mean you are being honest about how deeply the narcissistic relationship affected you. As you sit with the emptiness and slowly begin to rediscover yourself, you will notice something else happening. The narcissist's attempts to pull you back and become increasingly desperate and increasingly transparent. They may reach out with elaborate apologies, promising they have changed, claiming they have done the work, insisting that this time will be different. They may create emergencies that seem to require your immediate attention. They may use other people to communicate messages to you, trying to find a crack in your boundaries. All of this is noise. All of this is their inability to sit with the darkness you return to them. They are looking for any way to offload it again, to find relief from the burden of their own shadow. The old you would have felt guilty for not responding, would have wondered if maybe they really have changed, would have considered giving them one more chance. The new you recognizes these attempts for what they are. Not genuine transformation, but manipulation. Not real change, but temporary adaptation designed to regain access to their shadow carrier. You do not engage. You do not explain. You do not defend your choice to maintain boundaries. You simply continue sitting in your own emptiness, doing your own work, reclaiming your own life. This is when the narcissist may shift tactics entirely. If they cannot pull you back in, they may attempt to destroy your reputation. They may spread lies about you, paint themselves as the victim, recruit others to their narrative of your supposed cruelty. This is called the smear campaign, and it is one of the narcissist's most predictable moves when they realize they have truly lost control over you. Watching this happen can be painful, especially when people you thought knew you better seem to believe their lies. But here is what you must understand. Anyone who truly knows you will not be swayed by their narrative. Anyone who believes their lies without seeking your perspective was never really in your corner to begin with. Their need to destroy your reputation reveals everything about their character and nothing about yours. Healthy people do not launch campaigns against their ex-partners. Healthy people process their grief, learn from their mistakes, and move forward with their lives. The narcissist cannot move forward because they have not integrated what happened. They are still projecting, still avoiding, still refusing to face their own shadow. The difference now is that you are no longer available to receive those projections. So they spray them everywhere, hoping someone, anyone, will catch what you refuse to carry. Let them. Their chaos is no longer your concern. Your concern is the emptiness you are sitting in, the self you are slowly discovering, the life you are carefully rebuilding from the ground up. In this rebuilding, you begin to notice something profound. You are making different choices. You are attracted to different people. You are setting boundaries you never imagined setting before. You are saying no without guilt, yes without obligation. You are becoming sovereign. You are becoming whole. You are becoming the integrated self that Jung wrote about, the person who has faced their own shadow rather than projecting it onto others. And in this integration, you become someone the narcissist can never touch again. The moment you truly integrate your own shadow is the moment you become immune to the narcissist's manipulation forever. This is not about becoming hard or closed off. This is not about building walls so high that nothing can reach you. This is about something far more powerful and far more subtle. It is about becoming so honest with yourself about your own darkness that no one else can use it against you. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is not evil. It is simply unconscious. It contains all the parts of ourselves we have deemed unacceptable, the qualities we learned to hide, the impulses we were taught to suppress, the aspects of our personality that did not fit the image of who we thought we should be. The empath's shadow often contains anger, selfishness, boundaries, and the capacity to say no without guilt. These are not bad qualities. These are necessary qualities. But somewhere along the way, you learn that being a good person meant never being angry, never being selfish, never setting firm boundaries, never refusing what others asked of you. The narcissist exploited this disowned shadow perfectly. Every time you felt angry at their treatment of you, they made you feel guilty for your anger. Every time you wanted to prioritize your own needs, they accused you of being selfish. Every time you attempted to set a boundary, they punished you for it. Every time you said no, they made you believe you were being cruel. They trained you to keep your shadow locked away, to continue disowning the very parts of yourself that could have protected you from their abuse. But now you are doing something different. You are bringing your shadow into consciousness. You are examining your anger and discovering it is not a character flaw but appropriate rage at being mistreated. You are looking at your selfishness and realizing it is actually healthy self-care. You are exploring your capacity for boundaries and understanding that limits are not punishment but necessary structures for authentic relationship. You are integrating what you once disowned. And in this integration you become whole. When you are whole, when you have consciously acknowledged and accepted all parts of yourself, the narcissist loses their primary weapon against you. They can no longer shame you for your anger because you are no longer ashamed of it. They can no longer guilt you for your boundaries because you no longer feel guilty about protecting yourself. They can no longer manipulate you through your shadow because you have brought your shadow into the light. This is what Jung meant when he said that wholeness is more important than goodness. The person trying to be perfectly good will always have a shadow they are fleeing from, and that shadow will control them from the unconscious. The person who has integrated their shadow may not be perfect, but they are real, authentic, and impossible to manipulate through shame. You begin to notice this shift in your interactions with everyone, not just the narcissist. People who used to be able to push your buttons find that the buttons no longer work. Situations that would have sent you into spirals of self-doubt now roll off you with ease. Accusations that would have devastated you now seem almost comical in their inaccuracy. You have become solid in yourself. Not rigid but solid. Not defensive but clear. Not closed but boundaried. This solidity terrifies the narcissist more than anything else you could do. They are accustomed to your fluidity, your willingness to doubt yourself, your tendency to absorb whatever they projected. This new version of you, this integrated version, does not absorb anything. You simply reflect reality back with perfect clarity. When they lie, you do not argue or try to convince them of the truth. You simply know the truth and let them sit with their lie. When they rage, you do not scramble to calm them or take responsibility for their emotion. You simply observe their rage as their own experience. When they project their shadow onto you, you do not catch it or carry it or defend against it. You simply let it fall between you, recognizing it as theirs. This is the power of integration. This is the strength of wholeness. This is why only the empath who has done their shadow work can truly be free of the narcissist's influence. But integration brings another gift you may not have anticipated. It brings compassion, not the boundaryless compassion that allowed you to be exploited, but a deeper, wiser compassion that can hold both truth and kindness simultaneously. You begin to see the narcissist not as a villain in your story but as a deeply fractured person who never learned to integrate their own shadow. You recognize that their cruelty stems from their terror, that their manipulation comes from their emptiness, that their need to control you was really their desperate attempt to control the chaos within themselves. This understanding does not make what they did acceptable. It does not obligate you to forgive them or reconcile with them or give them another chance. But it does free you from hatred, from the need for revenge, from the desire to make them suffer as they made you suffer. You can see them clearly without needing to punish them. You can acknowledge their brokenness without trying to fix it. You can understand their pain without making it your responsibility. This is the final stage of returning their darkness. First you stop carrying it. Then you reflect it back to them. Then you integrate your own shadows so their projections have nowhere to land. And finally, you develop the wisdom to see them with clarity and compassion while maintaining absolute boundaries. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The narcissist will never access this privilege because they are too committed to the false self, too terrified of their own shadow, too dependent on others to carry what they refuse to face. But you have walked a different path. You have faced what was uncomfortable. You have integrated what was disowned. You have become whole not despite the narcissist's abuse but through the process of healing from it. You realize that healthy relationship does not require constant effort or endless sacrifice or perpetual self-abandonment. It requires two whole people choosing to connect, both capable of carrying their own shadow, both willing to see and be seen. This is what was always possible. This is what you were always worthy of. There is a moment that arrives quietly, without announcement, without fanfare, when you realize that the narcissist no longer occupies any space in your emotional world. You are not thinking about them constantly anymore. You are not rehearsing conversations or imagining confrontations or wondering what they are doing or who they are with. They have simply become a person you used to know, a chapter you have closed, a lesson you have learned and integrated. This is not the forced indifference of early healing, when you had to consciously remind yourself not to care. This is genuine neutrality. They have become irrelevant not because you are trying to make them irrelevant, but because you have filled your life with things and people and purposes that actually matter. This is freedom. This is what it feels like to have successfully returned their darkness and reclaimed your own light. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation as a return to the self, the deep center of being that exists beyond ego, beyond conditioning, beyond the roles we play for others. For the empath who has survived narcissistic abuse, this return feels like coming home after a long exile. You remember who you were before you learned to abandon yourself for others. Or perhaps you discover who you were always meant to become. Either way, you are no longer fragmented, no longer split between the person you are and the person you perform. You are whole. You are integrated. You are finally fully yourself. In this wholeness, you begin to understand the deeper purpose of what you endured. Not because the narcissist was meant to teach you something, not because the abuse was some cosmic lesson disguised as love, but because you chose to transform your suffering into wisdom rather than allowing it to calcify into bitterness. You took the darkness they tried to plant in you, and you composted it into fertile soil. You used their cruelty as the raw material for your own growth. You refused to let their inability to love determine your capacity to love yourself. This is the ultimate victory. Not over them, but over the parts of yourself that believed you deserved their treatment. Not against them, but for yourself and the life you are now free to live. As you move forward, you will occasionally encounter reminders of them. A song, a place, a phrase that triggers a memory. These moments no longer devastate you. They simply pass through you like weather, acknowledged and then released. You may even feel gratitude, not for what they did but for who you became in the process of healing from it. You are stronger now, wiser now, more discerning now. You know yourself in ways you never would have if you had not been forced to excavate the depths of your own being. The empath who has returned the narcissist's darkness and integrated their own shadow becomes something rare and powerful. You become someone who can love deeply without losing yourself. You can feel everything without being controlled by feeling. You can offer compassion without sacrificing your boundaries. You have learned the secret that the narcissist will never understand. True strength is not found in domination or control or the ability to manipulate others. True strength is found in vulnerability, in honesty, in the courage to face yourself completely and accept what you find there. The narcissist remains fragmented, still projecting, still searching for someone to carry what they refuse to face. They will move from relationship to relationship, from supply to supply, repeating the same patterns with different people, never understanding why nothing ever feels whole or real or lasting. This is not your concern anymore. This is not your responsibility to fix or explain or grieve. This is simply the natural consequence of a life built on illusion rather than truth. Your life is being built on different ground now. You make choices from clarity rather than confusion. You form connections based on authenticity rather than need. You give from abundance rather than depletion. You love with wisdom rather than desperation. The people in your life now are different. They show up consistently. They take responsibility for their own emotions. They can receive your care without exploiting it. They see you as a whole person rather than as a function. These relationships feel strange at first because they are so easy, so uncomplicated, so free of drama. You keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the mask to slip, for the person to reveal themselves as another narcissist in disguise. But it does not happen. Because you have changed. You have integrated your shadow, you have healed your wounds, you have learned to trust your own perception. You are no longer attracting what you once attracted because you are no longer the person you once were. Jung taught that we cannot change anything until we accept it. You have accepted all of it. The relationship, the abuse, the role you played, the darkness you carried, the shadow you disowned. You have looked at it all with clear eyes and integrated it into your understanding of yourself and the world. And in this acceptance, you have been transformed. You are not the same empath who entered that relationship believing love meant sacrifice. You are not the same person who thought your worth depended on how much you could give or how much you could endure. You know now that your worth is inherent. That love should feel peaceful. That healthy relationships involve mutual care. That you are allowed to take up space, to have needs, to set boundaries, to choose yourself. This knowing is not intellectual. It lives in your bones, in your breath, in the way you move through the world. You have become the person the narcissist could never touch, not because you have armored yourself against feeling, but because you have integrated all of yourself so completely that there is nothing left for them to exploit. This is what it means to return the narcissist's darkness. This is what it looks like to reclaim your light. This is the journey from shadow carrier to integrated self, from empath to super empath, from victim to sovereign. You have walked through the fire and emerged not burned but refined. You have faced the darkness and discovered your own light was there all along, waiting patiently for you to remember. Now you remember. Now you know. Now you are free. And freedom, you have learned, is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of self.